Thanks for being with us on this Monday morning, the 17th of February. This is day one of Mornings with Richard Cross. We're glad to be with you and glad to welcome the Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Transportation, Brad White, in. You get the dubious honor of being guest number one on Mornings with Richard Cross. Good morning.
Well, that is an honor. Thank you for having me, and congratulations. Very, very well earned.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. A lot going on, and MDOT kind of in the middle. A lot of the conversations that are happening in the legislature. This House Bill 1 that the House of Representatives rolled out at the beginning of the legislative session. We get information last week, and the bill from the Senate on their side of things, and part of that is funding for MDOT, which obviously is right there in your wheelhouse. What are you hearing as you talk with legislators, as you kind of wait on where this ultimately goes?
Well, we're very encouraged. I mean, this is the first time in my memory, anyway, that in a regular session that you've had a recurring, dedicated stream of revenue for infrastructure as a major plank and the key piece of legislation that may work its way through since the 1987 four-lane program. Yeah. Back in 2018, we had a special session that dealt with infrastructure funding, but it was in response to an emergency that was facing the state as a result of some deferred maintenance and us not being able to take care of some of the bridges on our local system. So I'm hopeful that now that we've got a vehicle in both chambers of the legislature, that they'll be able to work some type of an agreement out that will provide the type of revenue we need to hit the federal performance targets that we're required to hit on the maintenance of our existing system, and at the same time continue to fund projects that build out the efficiency of our system. So this is the first time we've had this type of conversation, and I'm very grateful to the leadership of both houses of the legislature for including us in that.
Do you find yourself having a little trouble going to sleep at night hoping that this gets across the finish line, that they're able to, and I guess compromise is the word, because they're very key differences in this overall tax proposal, but both of them, to some degree, address MDOT.
Right, and I mean, and that is kind of the art of legislating, isn't it? I mean, I don't. All of these players that are involved are veteran members of the legislature that are familiar with the process. I don't think anyone's under some illusion that either of the bills would be passed into law as they're written now. And hopefully part of this process is going to be dealing with the good parts of both bills and trying to come up with an ultimate final version that would be good for the taxpayers of Mississippi, but still take care of these core functions of government that are outlined there.
So, Brad, one of the things that, and I know this can very quickly get off in the weeds when you start talking about gas tax and the way that gas tax is implemented. On House Bill 1, the Build Up Mississippi Act, there was the proposal to put a 5% sales tax on the purchase of gas. And the way I've just described that for simplest terms, if it costs you $100 to fill up at the pump, you're going to pay $105. There's a 5% sales tax. Whereas the proposal that the Senate put in place had a new excise tax. You referenced 1987 earlier. 18.4 cents a gallon is the state excise tax that goes on. There's a federal excise tax as well, and this would increase the excise tax on the state side of things. Does one or the other either make more sense or make it easier from a budgeting standpoint for MDOT?
Well, they both would generate the type of revenue that we need. Some of the first proposals that we put in sessions past dealt with providing for our funding in a dedicated, recurring manner within the existing budget. The purpose of both of these bills, though, is also to return taxpayer money back to the taxpayers with the elimination and reduction of the state income tax. So when you're looking at that, they recognize if you're going to remove that type of revenue out of the state budget, you have to be able to provide in some other fashion for the core function of government that is our infrastructure system. I remind everybody, we're a state agency, but we implement a federal program, right, and we're held accountable as to how we implement that program. All of the federal money, which makes up for more than half of our $1.5 billion budget a year, it doesn't come to us and just sit in a bank account. We have to spend our state funds first, they being the Federal Highway Administration, has to be able to ascertain we're following their rules and regulations, and then they reimburse us. So we run a reimbursement program of sorts, and every year we're graded on performance targets as to the condition of the asphalt and the pavement around the state on the existing system. And if we start falling too far behind in that, then you run into the risk of having the same type of situation we had on the local bridge program back a few years ago. So it's vital that we have some type of recurring revenue that's able to go into this federal program, complement what the Federal Highway Administration does, and allows us to keep ahead of our performance targets in the maintenance of our system, and at the same time allow for enough revenue for us to continue building out the efficiency of that system, to try to avoid places like you've got now in I-55 in DeSoto County or I-55 in Gluckstadt and areas around the coast. So
a chance for you to possibly stop chasing your tail for the first time ever,
well,
maybe?
You're able to catch up on the maintenance and rehabilitation of the existing system, and you're also able to continue to fund the capacity program that builds out our system. Here about 12 years ago, because of the lack of funding, the commission had to basically put a moratorium over that capacity construction program, that's new projects, in order to dedicate all the money we had available into the maintenance of our existing system so that we didn't risk losing the federal money that the Federal Highway Administration was giving us. Both of these bills provide recurring revenue in a manner that would allow us to keep up with our maintenance and keep the capacity program alive.
All right, what did you say a second ago that current budget number is? Did you say $1.5 billion?
About $1.5 billion. It's about like 1.47, something like that.
And this new money, if whether it's the excise tax or the 5% gas tax that would go into place, how much new money would that represent for you in terms of budgeting? Well,
I've not run those numbers. What I'm told the Department of Revenue gave the leadership in the House and the Senate is the House number with today's cost would generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 million a year.
Okay.
Now, the House bill also takes the lottery money that we
the $80 million from the lottery,
that to the PERS. And there's a few other elements on that, so we would end up netting somewhere in just shy of $300 million in the House plan. The Senate
is that
plan,
enough?
I'm certainly not going to turn it down. I mean, you're talking about, if you want to be real about it, I mean, we can talk about a perfect case scenario, and those numbers are in my opinion, unrealistic at this stage. Okay. I think if anything that would give us a couple of $100 million in recurring dedicated stream of revenue, we're going to be able to do a better job at keeping up with those performance targets and providing a better product to the taxpayer. So I do want us to be realistic. I mean, when you look at what our shortfall is, if we wanted to keep up with everything in a perfect manner, I mean, you're probably looking at close to $500 million in recurring revenue in just maintenance alone. I don't think that's realistic, So, I mean, we have to live in the world that we're in, and I think either of these bills would be a great step. The Senate bill, conversely, would generate, by the time it's fully implemented and it has an index component that keeps up with inflation, I mean, you're looking at probably $260 to $270 million a year with that. So both bills would provide the type of revenue that we would need to and both bills connect it directly to projects. That's something else that I think the people would want to know is this money would not just come to MDOT to be a slush fund for the commissioners. Both bills would tie it to the implementation of our 3-year plan, which was 100% projects around the state.
Now, does that become a 3-year rolling plan?
Well, that's kind of how it is now. I mean, we every year, and when you look at the rehabilitation of the system, every year the interstates are inspected by Federal Highway and our team. Every other year the rest of the state system is. And from that, there is a list of projects that follows data that would say this is where you need to hit. And we normally try to obligate 3 years out. I listened to Senator Harkins on your program the other day, and he mentioned a conversation he and I had about how we've never been able to fully implement the 3-year plan because the cost always keep pushing projects further and further out.
Yeah.
This would allow us to get the plan built in the time frame that we try to originally set for it.
You got a break coming up in just a second. I thought one of the things that Senator Harkins said that that was important when we talked the other day, and you mentioned it a second ago, was the indexing piece of this. Mm-hmm. So if that excise tax goes in at, 9.4 cents per gallon, I think that was the number.
9, I believe.
9 cents a gallon, then that's indexed and could go up over time as the price of gas changes as well.
Yeah, and I think they do have a cap on that, though. So, I mean, it's something that would be responsible and something the legislature could monitor, but it is a component that the 87 4-lane program did not have.
Brad White, Executive Director of MDOT, joining us on Mornings with Richard Cross. We'll continue the conversation. There's a question that we have gotten regularly. I'll ask you this and maybe give you a chance to defend MDOT just a little bit when we get back. People say, why can't MDOT be better with the money they've got? I see MDOT workers where there are 5 of them when it could just be one doing a job. I promise you, I get that question all the time. I'll let you answer that when we come back. This is Mornings with Richard Cross on Super Talk, Mississippi. Good Monday morning. Thanks for being with us. It's Mornings with Richard Cross on Super Talk, Mississippi. Brad White is our guest, Executive Director at MDOT, talking about new funding models, potentially more money to keep projects going. And I told you before the break we would start with this when we come back. I mean, if MDOT comes up, there is rarely a day that goes by that we don't get a message on the C Spire text line where somebody says, well, why don't they just manage their money that they've got better? I see MDOT guys working all the time, and there'll be 5 of them, and 2 of them are leaning on a shovel. I'm not sure that that's a fair characterization, but I know that's criticism that you've heard in the past and in times going back. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, we're not immune to some of the same problems every other agency has. It seems like almost every day I'm signing termination letters for employees that may not be living up to what we would like for them to be. But there's a lot of things that people don't understand. For example, if you see most of the workers you see out are contract workers. They work for a construction company or a asphalt company that has been hired by the department to do the work that's out there getting done. When you see a lot of MDOT workers, they're doing your routine maintenance, which could be filling a pothole or guardrails or other things. And a lot of times you have extra people out there simply to help with the safety issue of trying to move force traffic away from the people that are doing the work. So you'll have extra vehicles there. I mean, keep in mind that these people that are on our maintenance forces are our first responders. They're out there standing a few feet away from people that have total disregard for the speed limits and safety, or they're on their phone or doing other things. So sometimes you will see some MDOT vehicles out there that's basically forcing some traffic away from people that are doing work. But, you know, these are also the forces that when the weather's at its worst and everybody else is at home, these are the people that are out in the weather trying to keep the roadways open so that the first responders can get to those that are harmed by weather or some type of disaster and that needs the help. On the way in, I was receiving emails where a lot of our maintenance forces in North Mississippi are already going to work to getting ready to pre-treat the roads and being prepared for some of the winter weather that we're expecting over the coming days. But when you look at our budget, you've got about $1.5 billion annual budget. About $40 million of that is not connected in some way to a project. And that's paying the salaries of our information services, IT people, our other non-engineering salaries, administrative assistants. That's buying the equipment that we use. That's helping pay for the welcome centers that the state has all over the state that's on our shoulders to pay for. So when you look at our budget, I mean,
there's not a whole lot of wiggle room, is there?
3% is not in some way directly improving the roadway in that sense, but you couldn't do the other without what that 3% paid on. And we've had multiple audits, but the news lately with the state auditor and some of the performance review that's been done. I mean, one of those was ordered by the legislature a few years ago. Auditor White hired a very reputable firm that came in and looked at MDOT from tip to tail. And provided a lot of really valuable information on how we might could do things better, most all of which required some type of legislative action, which we've tried to do. We've recently refinanced some of the debt that was incurred when we had the ability to do help bonds, which the commission can no longer do now, but we tried to refinance that at a saving of about $40 million to the taxpayers and getting those paid off 8 years sooner. So certainly there's always room for improvement, but we're try to be pretty vigilant in looking at how we do business and what we're doing and making sure that we're being good stewards of the taxpayers' money.
We got a specific project question, and it was about the Pearl River Bridge on Highway 28. Talked about a lot of semi-truck traffic on local roads because of work that's going on. An update on that particular project?
Yeah, we're hopeful to have that back open by the end of this year.
Okay.
I'm from Simpson County. You were asking earlier, I heard you mention, where is Pinola? Pinola is just down Highway 28 from that river bridge where you're talking about.
There we go.
But that bridge has been damaged before by people crossing it that shouldn't have been crossing it. They are being held accountable. They're dealing with it. But it's a very unique situation that is taking a little bit more time than what we had hoped in order to be sure that the work's done in a safe way for those working on the bridge, but also that ultimately end up with a product that can be relied upon. And we've met with the county supervisors from both Copiah and Simpson County, and we understand the issues they're having. And I wish I could say that was the only situation where we run into that, but that's also why we've worked so hard to try to make infrastructure funding a major part of this session, not just from MDOT system, but the county state aid road system. We've been partnering with the Board of Supervisors Association and Harry Lee James, it's of the Office of the Governor State Aid Roads, to try to make sure that the legislature looks at this from a holistic standpoint. And one thing that gets missed is in both of these plans that you're talking about in the Senate and the House, it's not just MDOT that would receive extra revenue, but also the state aid road system, which are county roads and bridges around the state.
Brad, there's never enough time. There's so many projects to talk about. I appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Look forward to visits in the future.
Thank you. Congratulations again.
Thank you. Brad White, Executive Director, Mississippi Department of Transportation, joining us as we wrap things up in the 7 o'clock hour.